Hello and welcome to the Off the Post podcast. I'm your host, Cade Krakis, and we are now through week 8. And man, this year has flown by, but also playoff scenarios and playoff pictures start to shape up this week, and I'm so excited to bring you what we have through the first and second divisions, as well as the Northwest and women's divisions. There's a lot of teams jostling to get in that playoff race and really find themselves in a picture where they can potentially hoist some hardware at the end of the year. We also have our current standings. We have ourselves the matches, obviously, from this past week, and our interview segment alongside our League Cup Championship preview that's coming this weekend. Make sure to stay tuned. It's a jam-packed episode. It's going to be a long one, but bear with me. It's one you don't want to miss out on. Thanks so much for tuning into the Off the Post podcast. We'll be back in just a moment. We interrupt this episode of the NOSL Off the Post podcast to remind you that the official 2025 sponsor of the NOSL is Alanovus Corp. A big thank you to Alanovus Corp in all that you do. The NOSL and Alanovus Corp, creating impact, building community, and bringing the game to life. I'm your host, Cade Krakis, and it is time for our Week 8 matches. Man, we had a lot this weekend. Let's take a look at our men's first division. 3-1 is where we will begin with Ashland United taking down Twinsburg United. Then we move to Mansfield Liederkranz, who took down Mahoning Trumbull United 3-2. Moving into our next 3-2 result, it is Susserfuss Belverin pulling off a nitty-gritty one-goal win over Greater Columbus FC. Moving into Delaware Rising and Ohio City SC. What a big game this was. 12 total goals being scored between both sides. Delaware Rising coming out on top 8-4 in a 4-goal victory. And then we have one of two of our blowouts this week. It was Worcester taking down Stark County United 15-0, and then Delaware Rising finished the job in our men's first division 3-0 over Susserfuss Belverin. Moving into our men's second division, it is Mansfield Liederkranz falling to Akron United 4-1 as Akron United tries to keep themselves atop the standings in Division 2. Moving into our next one, Paxos FC is our second and our only other blowout victory this week, 14-0 over Raiders Football Club. Moving into our next result in the men's second division, 7-1 Forest City took down Amish Country United, and then AFC Kent took down Black Clover 4-0. Moving into our women's division, two results from this past week. It was Delaware Rising taking down Mansfield Liederkranz 2-0, and Susserfuss Belverin beating Twinsburg United 5-0. Last but not least, we have our Northwest Division. It's a 6-4 victory for Firelands United over FC Perrysburg. A pretty high-scoring affair between the two, but a 2-goal difference will seal the deal for Firelands. And last but not least, Valentis Athletica, a 5-1 victory over AC Elite. That's our scores, our matches, and what we saw in Week 8. Make sure to stay tuned as we've got lots of things coming your way here soon, including standings, the League Cup, and our interview, all coming your way here shortly on the Off the Post podcast. It's now time to sit down with Mike Paxos of Paxos FC to talk a little about the journey of the organization, how their first year in the NOSL is going, and much more. Make sure to stay tuned. That interview's coming your way here now on the Off the Post podcast. Welcome back to the Off the Post podcast. I'm your host, Cade Krakis, and I'm now joined by Mike Paxos. Mike, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Cade. Really appreciate it.
Of course, it's great to have you on the podcast. And first and foremost, give a little bit of background on yourself to the audience so they can get to know you a little bit better.
Oh, geez. I've been involved with soccer my entire life, basically. Played from a young age. Was fortunate enough, my family was heavily involved in soccer to the point my father and my uncles were actually the initial owners of the Canton Invaders back in the league was called AISA, switched to NPSL, and my uncle Steve Paxos, he actually became commissioner of that league towards the end. And yeah, so I've had a long background in soccer my whole life. Now my kids play, so that's why I'm still involved. For sure. So yeah, and so what's the story with Paxos FC as a whole? When did you guys start? How did it kind of become an idea for you? And give the little bit the lingo and the lowdown for that. Well, sure, Kate. It's to me, I find it an interesting story. Anyways, PFC would have started back in about 2019. My sons were in high school. My oldest son, he was, I think after his freshman or sophomore year, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Anyways, he came to me the first time around and, it was like, hey, I want to get my buddies together, play some rec stuff. No problem. We just put them together, had a good time. Then, being back involved with soccer after taking so many years off, I'm watching how competitive it is, how there's clubs, there's school, there's the competition, and coming into my son's sophomore year, like he just wasn't having fun playing soccer. It was more about, did I make this team? Am I starting? Am I doing this? All the pressures that come, not necessarily, pressures from within, from your coaches, from this, that, the other. So long story short, I put these kids again together the following year, and I souped it up, got them uniforms, the whole nine. My goal was, these kids are playing a sport. You got to remember that you're having fun. Nothing was funner than playing in a rec league in the winters. It was all their high school buddies, and it actually helped them build camaraderie and teamwork and, those kind of things. So for me, it was just a matter of reminding these kids that soccer is fun, despite all the pressures you get from parents, coaches, this, that, the other. So that was the initial start of it. And we went on a run for a few years, and I kind of fed the beast a little bit with these kids. They were getting super involved, but those are the things you like to see. You want these kids having fun, getting involved, and they play better when, some of the pressure's relieved a little bit. So we did about 4 or 5 years of indoor soccer, multiple sessions, this, that, the other. We were pretty successful. And then, my son now, he plays at Walsh University. I don't know, about a year ago, it started the chirping, hey, Mr. Paxos, you thought about doing anything bigger or, going outdoors?
Yeah.
One thing led to another, and, boom, we started, with an outdoor league this year. Exactly. This is our first foray into more competitive soccer, we'll say.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, is that you guys are on fire this season. You guys have been leading the second division, Group B. But before we jump into that, when did the success for PFC start? I mean, did you guys have a lot of success even while having fun in your indoor leagues?
Overall, yeah. The first year that we were together, it was, a little hodgepodge, and
for sure,
they were young too. They were all a bunch of freshmen. And so it was a good experience. So they built character that first year as freshmen. But since then, knock on wood, and granted, it is rec league, so the competition is not what you're really looking for. But, during that time, we were pretty successful. We won some rec league championships, those kind of things. But but it built a foundation for these kids to get better. That's how I always looked at it. I got to play with them and watch them all winter long, and then they go back to their clubs and their high schools, and you kind of see a difference. They play with a lot more passion, a little more fire, a little more excitement. Yeah. So we were always had a level of success the whole time through, because, at the end of the day, especially during those years, their club coaches and whatnot, they did a good job, because all I had to do is create a lineup here and there,
exactly.
Give the high school kids some motivational words, just enough to, get them on the field,
them out there,
get them playing.
So when you look at 2025 as a whole, obviously you said it's your first year in the NSL doing this outdoor side of things. So for yourself and for the team, what was kind of the lead up to that? How did you guys get into the NOSL? How did the formulation of the team start to happen? What's kind of the background there?
Okay, well, last summer we kind of started, and I talked to some of the boys, and they were definitely interested, now that they were in college. So NOSL was something I would always see popping up here and there and everywhere. Yeah. So, I just dug in, got on the website, started talking with Braden in the group, and said, hey, look, we have a little bit of interest. We just, I started gathering info. So last fall, I spent the fall kind of gathering info on what it takes to kind of do this. Even though back then I'm still running into things I didn't anticipate, but
yeah.
And then slowly, I had my sons reach out to their buddies. Like I said, my oldest son, he plays at Walsh University. So he talked to, a few of his teammates. Hey, would you guys be interested? And it really kind of worked out in the sense that, we are local, we're North Canada. I got a good amount of Walsh guys on. And, it turns out they were looking for somewhere to play after their spring season at Walsh, and before they go into camp in August. So this was like kind of a perfect storm, I would say, where the length of the season is just right. Everything NOSL had to offer kind of fit into what we were looking to do.
That's awesome. And so now, as we shift gears and we talk about 2025 specifically, you guys have really been showing up and showing out. 51 is your goal differential, plus 51. You got an 8-1-0 record. You got 25 points through 9 matches played, and at the top of the Group B standings. Did you expect this level of success?
Yes and no. I knew that we had a good group of kids, and I knew that, if they play up to their abilities. And we have a great coach, Matt Fergarelli. He's an assistant at Mount. He's coached around the area a long time. He is masterful with these kids. But to say that we expected, yes, we had a level of expectations because, I hate to say it, but if I'm going to put my name on something, and it's a little bit, 100%. It takes a little bit to try to do that. But I don't view it as I'm putting my name on something. I view it as I'm associating myself with kids that I want to be a part of something like that.
Yeah.
So, but we thought we would be okay. Our goals early on were kind of simple. We're a new team. Division II, obviously our goal is to get get promoted as soon as we could. We knew that we'd compete in the League Cup, and we wanted to have a strong showing there, and I think we did. We bowed out in the semis. Unfortunately, we played 60 minutes a man down. So, but overall, we had some expectations, and I would say, I think we've exceeded even some of my expectations.
Yeah, for sure. And to give more to what you were saying, it was just a 1-goal loss to Valentis Athletica in that semifinal round, 4-3. So like you said, put out a great showing to just come just a stop short of playing in that League Cup championship. But moving back to kind of the playoffs here soon. You guys have already clinched the playoffs, and you've clinched home field advantage for the semifinal round, which is something awesome for you guys. And you're the only team so far in the second division to do that yet. So moving into the playoffs, obviously expectations is to win it all and get promoted. But if for you specifically, what are your expectations for it? What are you hoping to see from your guys come the playoffs?
Well, it's been an interesting summer. We've learned a lot, when you're dealing with college age kids, and, I give Brandon Mass a lot of credit because he had given me some guidance early on. Hey, make your rosters as big as you can, because and we did find out kids have vacations, they have jobs, they have this. It's a different set than when they were, in high school and there where, the parents kind of controlled everything, right?
Exactly.
Now they have their own schedule. So that's been the biggest challenge. I've actually had a couple of guys now that they've left the team. They're gone for the summer. They had other commitments with work and schools and that kind of stuff. So, we're going to come into the playoffs with, not the full squad, but pretty close. So, obviously we want to compete hard, and, we want to try our best to get promoted.
Yeah, and when you look at the future of PFC moving on past this season, kind of what's your expectations there? What do you want to see the team do? How do you want to see it continue to grow?
Well, like I said, we've spent a lot of this year learning, and we're going to take all the lessons we learned this year and use them in the off season to start making our plan. Obviously, our hope is to be promoted for next year. If we're successful in that, to be in Division I at NOSL is a great accomplishment. We're going to look forward to that competition, but we also have our eye in the future. We know that there's other competitions, there's other leagues. So, but we're going to take a slow, homegrown approach. I like bringing in college-age kids for the summer. I think it's a perfect situation for them to come in, be free. You're not tied to schools or clubs or anything like that, and just play. 100%. I've noticed a lot of the kids this summer. One of my son came to me the other day, and he mentioned that one of the players, told him, you know what, I'm actually having fun playing soccer again. It was awesome. Starting to be a dream. And when you hear that, that's what motivates me to keep this going, and how can we build it, and how can we get better? And, soccer is a sport, and it's being developed in a way that a little guy like me in Canton, Ohio can put together a club, enter a 5th-tier football division, and have the possibility to keep improving and 100%. Find other leagues and make it, as big or as small as we want. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about soccer. It literally is for everyone.
100%. Well, Mike, that was great. Thanks so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Hey, Kate, thank you. I really appreciate the time.
We are in the best part of the year, and that is where we're starting to see playoff scenarios come to light. It is our men's first and second divisions, our Northwest and our women's division standings through Week 8. Let's take a look at where we are right now. Moving into the men's first division, we have Ohio City SC atop the ladder, tied with Mansfield Liederkranz at 19 points apiece. What a battle it has been. They have already clinched the first 2 playoff spots. Moving into our next teams, though, Delaware Rising, Worcester FC, Ashland United, Greater Columbus, and Sassafras Belverin are the next to fight. We take a look at Delaware Rising to begin. They've played through 7 matches, 18 points for them. They've got 2 games to play, and it looks like they'll lock up their 5th straight playoff appearance. They can clinch with a win/draw Wednesday night versus Greater Columbus. They can also clinch with a draw versus Greater Columbus if Ashland fails to beat Sassafras Belverin on Wednesday night. Taking a look at Worcester FC, who's just behind them with 13 points. They're only 1 game left to play, and that is hosting Mahoning Trumbull next week. They need to win to have a shot. A win still wouldn't guarantee the playoffs, though. They need Ashland and Greater Columbus to slip up down the stretch of the season. They have a +6 goal differential lead on Ashland, so if Ashland wins and draws their remaining 2 games and Worcester can beat Mahoning, it looks good for them. Taking a look at Ashland, a team that we just mentioned a couple different times in the scenario for Worcester. They've got 13 points this year, and they can also clinch a playoff spot by winning their final 2 games. They'll host Sassafras on Wednesday, Greater Columbus on the final day of the regular season. A win or a draw to finish the season. If Worcester fails to beat Mahoning, they'd be into the playoffs. Moving into Greater Columbus, they can clinch by winning final 2 games of the season at Delaware Rising on Wednesday night and hosting Ashland United next Sunday. They don't have a goal difference over Worcester and Ashland that they have, so they need to focus on maximizing points and winning games. And last but not least, Sassafras Belverin in that 7th spot. It's a long shot, a very big one at that, but if they can win their final 2 games, they'd be sitting at 15 points and would need the following: Worcester to fail to draw or lose to Mahoning, 2, beat Ashland and Greater Columbus draw, and 3, Greater Columbus to lose to Delaware Rising and draw with Ashland. They need all 3 of those to go right to make the playoffs. In 8, 9, and 10, though, we see Stark County United, Twinsburg United, and Mahoning Trumbull United. Moving into our second division, this is where the playoff race is starting to heat up. The top 4 teams will make it, and it is Akron United who sits in that number 1 spot in Group A. Paxos FC in the number 1 spot in Group B. They have clinched playoffs and have clinched home field advantage for semifinals. Akron United has not just yet, due to the fact that AFC Kent and Forest City FC are right on their tail in Group A. Raiders FC out of the picture alongside Amish Country United, and Black Clover FC and Mansfield Liederkranz 2 are fighting for that number 2 spot in Group B as they continue to tussle down the back half of the year. Moving into the Northwest and women's divisions, all 4 teams will make the playoffs in the Northwest division. It looks like we'll see Valentis Athletica and Firelands United being those lead teams up top that are going to be looking to be the teams to beat, as AC Elite and FC Perrysburg sit in the 3 and 4 spots. And last but not least, our women's division. This is where it's also interesting towards the top. Ohio City SC, Sassafras Belverin, and Delaware Rising hold the top 3 spots, with 18 points, 18 points, and 15 points, with lots of games left to play for the top two teams there. Moving into our 4, 5, and 6, it is Panthers FC, Twinsburg United, and Mansfield Liederkranz rounding out the rest of the list, with Panthers FC and Twinsburg United still fighting for that number 4 spot. That's a look at our standings and our playoff picture as of right now. We'll have another episode coming out next week that will go even further in depth on how crazy the standings and the playoff race has become as we get ready for the NOSL playoffs to be just around the corner. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned right here on the Off the Post podcast. Before we go, we just want to give a reminder that the League Cup final is this Sunday, July 6th at 3:30 p.m. It'll be Valentis Athletica taking on Delaware Rising, two teams that are hot in their respective divisions. Who will host the League Cup final championship? Find out this weekend here on Sunday, July 6th. Reminder, 2 days after July 4th, so continue the festivities into the weekend and enjoy some great NOSL soccer competition in the League Cup final. Delaware Rising, Valentis Athletica, the stakes are certainly high. That's all that we have for this week's episode of the Off the Post podcast. I want to say thank you so much to you, dear watcher, for tuning in. It's been a great time to get to know all of you out there and have you guys stay tuned to all the action here in the NOSL. Well, that's all that we've got for this week's episode of the Off the Post podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next time.